guys for joining the podcast. I'm very excited to. It is a good time for you guys to be here because literally days away from the Celtics being in the NBA Finals.
Oh yeah, man.
I'm sure you're
Thanks for
feeling
having
pretty
us.
good.
Oh, we're feeling all right over here at Divine Sweater LLC, I think. Yeah, obviously, it's been a fun weekend.
Mhm.
Boston Calling was a blast. We were very excited to do that, and good time to spend time around a bunch of happy Bostonians, pumped that our beloved Seas have done it and conquered the vast and horrifying legions of the Eastern Conference and made their way all to the NBA final, all
Yeah.
the way to the NBA Finals.
Well, and Alex too. I mean, this almost technically feels like a second appearance because I was fortunate enough to guest on Celtics Lab with you.
That's
So
true.
this feels like a repeat, which is great. And but before we get into some of that Celtics discussion, why don't we talk about Divine Sweater a little bit? Um, because you guys had an album that came out in 2022. It is called Deep Down, a Nautical Apocalypse, which I enjoyed very much. I got to see you guys come through Chicago, which was cool. Um, and you guys got to work with some of my buds in San Fermin and with the Better Company crew. I guess starting off, tell us a little bit about what it's been like since that record came out and where are you guys kind of heading since then?
Yeah, man, it's been cool. So we had put out two records before that we self-released. And so doing Down Deep with Better Company, that was like our first label experience. So that was cool. We had recorded that album with Alan Tate and like the tail end of 2021, started of
Mhm.
2022, I want to say. And it was just cool, being in a studio. We had been a very capital DIY band up to that point. But kind of merging that with more professionalism sonically and infidelity was cool. So that record came out. We toured it the summer after it released,
Mm.
and then yeah, just started working on another one right away that we put out our first single from earlier this month.
Sweet. How did you guys get in touch with Alan?
I think he DM'd us, I
Oh,
believe.
cool.
If you watch this, Alan, and that's wrong, feel free to
Mhm.
correct the record, but I think he might have like just seen a song on Spotify and like reached out.
Cool. And 'cause I know that they're very Brooklyn based. You guys are Celtics fans. Are you in New York or are you from Boston?
We're from Boston. Like I'm from Rhode Island.
Okay.
Went to Boston College. Was in Boston for like 5 years. Megan, our singer, is from Canton, a suburb of
Mhm.
Boston, so she's been from Boston. Our drummer Chris also grew up in Rhode Island and also went to college in Boston. Alex, I don't need to speak for you, but you obviously grew up in Boston.
Yeah.
And our drummer Steve, I guess he technically grew up in New Hampshire. Wait, was he living in Boston too when y'all went to high school together?
No, he was living in New Hampshire, but he has subsequently moved to Boston and is now still residing in a lovely suburb of Rosendale, just outside of Boston. Yeah, no, I mean, I think for us, Boston really more so than anything represents like where Divine Sweater as a project
Mhm.
kind of finds its roots. We still very much rep Boston. We have a lot of love for the Boston scene. Boston's like where this band coalesced into something, and it is true that, like, while Sean and Megan and I live in Brooklyn right now, we all have family in that area. We all have very close friends in that area. We spend a whole heck of a lot of time there. And of course, the C's loyalty does not change regardless of
Mhm.
where you live.
Yeah, we
Of
were just there
course.
for 9 days in a row.
Yeah, that's true.
Literally just got back last night.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, I lived in Brooklyn for like 4 years, and it's an awesome place to be. But you never stop rooting for your home team.
Can't do it.
Are you adopting any New York teams?
The
I'm at
Mets,
least
maybe.
marginally. Yeah, the Mets are pretty fun. I mean, the Sox are always number one, but
Yeah.
going to Mets games is a blast. I'm at least marginally interested in becoming a Libs guy. I gotta say, I think the New York Liberty are a pretty fun watch. The W, I think, is a really
Mhm.
cool and interesting league that is trending upward in so many different ways. And I think that the Liberty are just like a nasty, nasty basketball team. They're so good.
Yeah.
And being able to catch some of those games right over at Barclays seems like it would be pretty fun. They're definitely the best team at the Barclays Center by a country mile. So,
Hmm.
yeah, I think Libs, Mets, and of course the Brooklyn Cyclones.
Oh yeah, baby. Coney Island.
Cyclones games are too fun.
Oh,
Dude, those are electric when you're like drinking a beer out of like this mile-high baseball bat. It's like
Hmm.
you go there on Seinfeld night. It's like, what is happening?
I
that's good
did
stuff.
a Cyclones game on 4th of July once. It was like the wildest night ever.
Oh, I'm sure.
Coney Island in general on a 4th of July is a wild place to be.
Yeah.
That
Did
makes
you see
sense.
the hot dog eating contest or anything? What was your
No,
itinerary
no,
like
I did.
that day?
You know, it's funny. Like, I didn't even think about it until after, but it was like an evening thing, and I think that happens like early in the morning.
Yeah, that tracks.
But I do love Coney. It's a strange place, but I love it. Um, cool. And so you guys are kind of moving into a new record, right?
That is
Most
correct. Yeah. Our most recent single, Deep Side, is the opening salvo for a record that we are going to be releasing in the fall.
cool.
We've been working on it for better part of last year. Similar deal, recording with Alan and the Better Company crew. And yeah, no, it's been really fun just like putting in the work to make that happen. It feels like sonically it is both familiar and also definitely charting its own course in a
Yeah.
lot of ways. And I think Deep Side is a great example of like that, where there's elements where it's the Divine Sweater that you know and love, hopefully, or at least like maybe, and have grown to know for the past few years. But it's kind of taking things in a slightly different, I think maybe more energetic in some ways direction, which I think is really exciting for all of us. I don't want to speak for you, Sean, but I know that you like Deep Side a little bit.
Yeah. Uh, I agree with that. I feel like we were trying to expand our like emotional palette specifically. I felt like we
Cool.
had a lot of songs that were like trying to make catchy or whatever, but a wider emotional range was kind of the focus behind this record we're going to announce in the summer, then
Cool.
release and then tour.
Awesome. And as you guys are touring, I guess, is there like a band that you guys would like love to tour with?
It's definitely
Question.
always for me.
Yeah, I mean, always would be insane.
I saw them backstage on Sunday. They shouted out they gave Jason Tatum a good luck blessing. So depending on how the finals goes, could always be like the Lil B of indie rock, just giving out blessings to
Yeah,
athletes and relevant musicians.
I
Yeah,
mean,
I
that
was
Molly
would be
like,
Rankin's a hoop
terrific.
head.
Molly Rankin is a hoop head. Yeah, I mean, she shouted out Kyrie Irving when we saw her in 2018 at the Paradise Rock Club when he was a Celtic. So she definitely knows ball.
Yeah.
Always, if you're listening, Divine Sweater would love to connect. Um,
I
yeah,
think we need to find a way to make all of our dreams come true. Molly comes on the podcast and then just goes on tour with Divine Sweater, and like that's all our dreams come true. It's great.
that would be pretty great.
um, cool. Yeah. Well, very excited. You have the single out, but very excited to hear more from that new album. And eventual tour from there. Another thing I like to ask people though is, and this may relate to kind of what went into like writing this new album, but what are you guys listening to? Kind of what kind of stuff are you into right now?
you can go Al.
So we just played Boston Calling, and there were so many incredible artists there to listen to and be inspired by. Local favorites in Boston, shout out like Key and Tisk Task and Paper Lady, who are all amazing and are very much getting like some deserved Boston love. I started listening to, prior to Boston Calling, The Thing, who played on the Blue Stage on Sunday. They were terrific, and I've been really into that. Obviously the headliners, and the Chapel Roans of the world are amazing, and they're full of earworms and other interesting things to listen to. I think I've mostly been directing my listening towards like artists that have been on the Boston Calling bill for this past run as of late, with the exception of Not Like Us, which I can't stop listening to, by Kendrick Lamar. I
Mhm.
literally can't, like, I've been listening to that song legitimately since it came out multiple times a week. It's crazy how infectious that hook is.
Isn't it wild? I don't know if we've ever experienced like a diss track that was so listenable.
It's crazy. Like, he made the song of the summer and it's just dancing on this man's grave. Like, how do you do that? That's so rude.
Yeah.
Usually it's like you're listening to the lyrics and you're like, damn, I see the point, but you're never like, this is like fucking good.
I'm trying to get down.
Yeah.
I can't think of a diss track to just speaking to like the universal or wider appeal of that. That the hook is essentially like you are not like all of us. It's not it like he made it no longer just about Kendrick
Yeah.
Lamar. It was like Drake, you're not like the entire West Coast, my guy.
Yes.
You don't
The
need to be in society.
is
Yeah.
everyone versus you is now this beef.
Man.
It's incredible. So that's a good range of stuff and some good recommendations there.
For myself, I've kind of been on like a late 60s, early 70s singer-songwriter kick as of late.
I
I just
love it.
watched the Judy Sill documentary
Mm.
and have been listening to her discography, which is really rewarding and melodically interesting.
Nice.
And all her songs are kind of like tunnels. They have these cool twists and turns that you don't
Mhm.
necessarily see coming. I've definitely been on a Joni and Neil kick since they came back to Spotify. That
Yep.
was a glorious day for
And
me.
Neil's touring.
Yeah, he was just in Boston like 2 weeks ago, I think. I think he was just in New York and Boston. Maybe
He
I'm wrong.
canceled his Chicago show a couple days ago because he was sick, which is such a bummer.
That's tough. Do you know what venue he was going to play?
Um, I want to say it's one of the outdoor venues in Chicago. It's like I don't know if how familiar you are with Chicago, but it was I think Northerly Island or whatever it's called now.
My brother lives there, so I have a decent Chicago game. Not
Yeah, it's
great, but
really right. It's right by Soldier Field, basically.
sweet. Yeah,
Um,
that's a beautiful backdrop
but cool.
for
Yeah,
a
I
music
mean
venue.
that 60s 70s singer songwriter range is something I always go back to. Like what's her name, Norma Tanega or whatever her name is. Um, there's a lot of good like you can always find some niche stuff in that genre that people just don't know about, which is cool.
Yeah, but then on the same time, to kind of co-sign what Alex was saying, I think Meg and I might have listened to the Chapel Roan record
There you go.
like 3 times driving up to Boston, like for that festival. Like that was unbelievably hype.
Yeah, a lot of people are definitely feeling that. It's funny. I saw like a random TikTok that was like, interviewing people at a festival, and someone's like, "Who is one of the most like underrated artists?" And someone said Chaperone. I don't know that. Yeah, I could say Chaperone's underrated. I feel like very highly rated.
The crowd at Boston Calling would say that Chapel Roan is
Yeah,
not underrated. She had about a couple thousand people, dancing on a string for her there. So,
yeah,
She had the biggest
absolutely.
crowd, either her or
oh
Megan the
yeah,
Stallion. Like definitely were the two biggest crowds.
Yeah, you can't. I feel like you can't be a headliner and be underrated.
yeah.
um, cool. Yeah, that's some. Those are all a good range of picks. Some good stuff. But why don't we talk a little bit about some hoops because it's playoffs time, and I feel like it's just like a good time to talk about basketball.
You already know.
So currently, as we speak, I know your future opponent is currently playing, and I don't know the score, and I'm not going to look because by the time this episode comes out, we'll all know, and you guys are actually probably going to be playing already. So whether it's let's just start with the Celtics. How have you guys? I know how you feel about the Celtics, and I know you feel that a lot of people are kind of coming at the Celtics, feeling that they're coasting, that they got it too easy. What do you say to the haters?
I can start off with this. To the haters, listen, the Boston Celtics are 12-2 without their starting center in the playoffs. They have the highest net rating of any team in the playoffs. They have the best offensive rating of any team in the playoffs. They have the best defensive rating of any team in the playoffs. And it seems like every time that these games get a little bit in balance, and let's be clear, we know full well that the Boston Celtics have had a relatively easy path here, playing the Heat without Jimmy Butler, playing the Cavs with Donovan Mitchell only partially available. Same for Tyrese Halliburton. Yeah, it's an easy path. Guess
Mhm.
what? That's what happens when you get the 1 seed.
Yeah.
That's what happens when you set the league on fire and win 64 games. You get the easy path because you get rewarded for dominating everybody in the Eastern Conference all year. So I will be blunt in saying that, I think the the haters on the Celtics from a national media standpoint are just like wildly off base and completely wrong about this team. The haters who are correct about this team are the Boston Celtics fans because nobody can hate the Boston Celtics more effectively and with more precision than the Boston Celtics fans. Like we've seen great teams come and go. We've seen teams disappoint. We've seen Tatum and Brown have brilliant moments and have, pretty substantial failures in the postseason. Nobody is nitpicking this team more than the Celtics' own fan base. And the fact that the Celtics' own fan base is relatively happy should send deep fear into the rest of the league because we're almost never happy with how this team is performing.
That's fair. That is very fair. Um, yeah, and I mean, it has been an easy road, but I don't know if you caught. I don't know. I don't even know what shows, but Jay Williams came to the Celtics defense today, being like, "Are they getting enough credit?" And he's like, "No, absolutely not."
I almost feel like the
Um,
meet like to speak for the national media takes, they seem a little disingenuous. Like I feel like it's not exciting to just talk about a team that has the most wins in the league by a mile and the 1 seed and goes 12-2. Like you have to like nitpick something
yeah,
or else it's not going to make like effective TV.
I mean
But
the national sports television in general is a whole different conversation. It's truly awful. Um, ESPN in particular is pretty
certainly,
rough.
Man.
Uh, even looking at like the NBA draft coverage with Bronny, and it's like Kendrick Perkins like stood up, and I'm like, this is like the smartest thing this man has ever said. Because like, why do we care about Bronny? Like the Nepo aspect like has to be addressed, and they just can't not defend it. It's just so wild to me.
And like, we haven't seen Bronny's a whole thing. We haven't seen anything from this guy to suggest that he's an NBA player at all, but it's fine, whatever.
And people, one of the defense, sorry, on the tangent, one of the defenses that one of the anchors was saying is that, well, we've never had like a player of like one of the greatest for it. It's like Michael Jordan had 2 kids who tried to play basketball and they just were not there very good. So like you don't have to just throw them in the league but you throw them in the league because it's a money move.
Yeah.
So I think you just got to embrace that next generation. But anyways, getting back to Celtics, um, who would you rather play?
that's
I would tend to agree, even though they're beating the Wolves in this series, and I think it's very, very likely that they are going to ultimately be the Celtics finals opponent. I just
Mhm.
feel like Boston matches up a little better.
Yeah, it'll
the
be.
math.
Go ahead.
Like the math's just in terms of like specific matchups, because I feel like the playoff series, it's so much more about like who your starting five matches up against. Like I just don't think that they have the length of the Wolves to really expose the Celtics' weakness, which is ultimately like rim protection
Mhm.
and like in the paint. And yeah, also a 5 seed has never won the title in the history of the NBA. And I would love the entire history of the league on our side when we get to that matchup with seeding.
That's true, although a
Or
6 seed has. or
or you
or
have
it's a
history
disaster.
made,
I'd
which is
be
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I
Um,
think it's so with Dallas, what's interesting is they're in some ways an absolute nightmare matchup for the Wolves and maybe not as much for Boston. The big thing that Dallas hangs their hat on is um, they have the two of the absolute peak on ball creators in the league, right?
mhm,
Kyrie and Luca have been playing out of their freaking minds for the whole playoffs. And they're a genuinely lethal offense when those guys get rolling. And in
right.
particular, their trade deadline moves have, with PJ Washington and Gafford and with, of course, the emergence of Derek Lively, they've really solidified into a team that plays above the rim. They have a lot of
Mhm.
athleticism. Derek Jones Jr. has, I think, been pretty incredible given what we've typically thought of about Derek Jones Jr. Like the athleticism and the speed for the Mavs is definitely not something that you can overlook in a finals opponent. But I think to Sean's point, what it comes down to is that um, Dallas has not played an offense that is anywhere close to the level of Boston's this postseason. Like I know that the Thunder had a really good regular season offense, but when it came postseason time, we saw what happened. It was SGA and nobody else out there looked like they wanted to take a shot at any point in that series. The Clippers and the Wolves, both teams that hung their hat on the defensive end first, their offense got rickety at times. Boston's offense, particularly with Kristaps Porzingis, who will in all likelihood be back for the finals, is a great deal better than any of those offenses. And Dallas's defense, while good, still to me has a couple of areas where I just am not sure that I trust Kyrie Irving to guard up on size for an entire series. I'm not sure that I trust
Mhm.
Luka to stay with Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown over and over and over again over the course of a 7-game series. I'm not sure I trust Derek Lively to be able to like make the right play when Porzingis is pulling him, 25 feet out from the basket and shooting threes. To me, what stands out is that Dallas's defense has never been tested in this postseason like they will be against Boston.
Yeah. Yeah, that'll be interesting for sure. And I feel like, I guess when you're talking about in terms of matching up, especially Kyrie, if you boil it down and in terms of like NBA Jam lineups, if you had 2 versus 2, if you had Kyrie and Luca versus Tatum and Brown, you think Cavs have the, or sorry, you think Celtics have the clear advantage?
Just because Tatum and Brown are both so much bigger than Kyrie and like can score as well as he can while probably being better defenders. I think definitely being better defenders.
I think the two-way stuff is the key.
Yeah.
Brown and Tatum can both do it at both ends. And Tatum's shot has been off for sure in this playoffs. He's shooting like well below his standard postseason averages from three. But I think what the national media part about Tatum ignores is that he's doing everything else at the absolute best
Mhm.
level of his career, from a physicality, aggression, inside scoring, rebounding, at all of that. Like Tatum is kind of imposing his will on a lot of these games in a whole bunch of different areas. He just seems like he's an absolute bear to guard right now. And even if the 3-point shot is not falling, he's still getting his. He's still putting up like
Mhm.
36 points these games. That's just a lot of pressure.
Definitely. And if Tatum say his shots aren't hitting, like which has happened, obviously, like you still at least have Brown who has been playing very good lately, especially. So I'd say it is looking, obviously disrespect aside to what people have been saying towards the Celtics, like obviously very deserving of like they were the number one seed for a reason. They were obviously a very good team. And so this is what a number one seed does is they go all the way through and prototypically should win it all. Yeah, I think it'll be an interesting series. I'm it's what I like about this is no matter what, we're going to get someone winning their first title. Some superstars are winning their first title. And even if Timberwolves somehow pull off a 3-0 comeback, you get Ant winning his first, you got Luca, and you got Kyrie. Well, Kyrie won't. He already got his, but you got Tatum and you got Brown. It's all, it's win-win, I guess, in general.
Yeah, no, I
Um,
think,
Go
I
ahead.
mean, I think I will definitely be driven insane if Kyrie wins a title on the Boston floor, just from a personal standpoint.
Yeah,
And
there's some personal stuff there.
I understand like, don't be an excessive Kyrie hater, and like all of that jazz. And I get where people are coming from with that. You want to make the series about Boston
Yeah.
being, a great team rather than like focusing all of your energy on Kyrie Irving and all that. With that being said, I would not love an outcome in which Kyrie Irving wins a title against the Celtics team. Let's just leave it at that.
Isn't he like 0-10 in his last 10 against Boston?
Yeah, no, Boston has owned him basically since the
That net
Harden,
series?
Kyrie, Durant Mavs or Nets series where it was Jason Tatum, Marcus Smart dealing with an injury, and like Tristan Thompson and Jeff Teague out there. So things have certainly shifted a little bit. But Kyrie is also playing, I think, some of the best basketball of his career. It does have to be said.
Yeah,
I
he
would
seems to
say you
have like
guys.
matured.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
was just say he does. There is a bit of a redemption arc with Kyrie, and that's probably in large part of him just saying less, and just playing basketball well, which is like a very easy thing to like, just the way he plays basketball.
I mean, it sure helps to have one of the three best players in the world in Luka Doncic by his side as well.
That's fair.
The Luka, man, that guy is really, really, really good at basketball. If there's one thing I'm even marginally worried about in the Mavs, it's just like there the Wolves do not have a player in, like, with all due respect to Anthony Edwards, who's I think having an outstanding postseason. The Wolves do not have a player like Luka who can actually take over a series basically by themselves.
That
Yeah,
game winner was
I
unreal.
yeah, that's like his patented move, like at this point too. Like he in his like limited playoff runs, like he's been absolutely electric. And I feel like as a Celtics fan, I'm always nervous in a series when the other team has the best player. And so that's definitely like the apprehension with the Mavs, even as a homer.
Mhm.
I think you got to admit that Luka is better than Tatum and more consistent, at least offensively, than Tatum. But yeah, I guess like historically in NBA finals that have been like that, like if the other team has the best player, you need a squad, like you need the
Yeah,
Spurs or uh I don't want to compare the Celtics to the KD Warriors, but you need to just like surround with so much talent that it overwhelms that. And that I think to the Celtics credit, I don't know if anyone or any team is as well equipped to defend a squad whose two best players are guards as the
Yeah.
Celtics
yeah.
are. Like as far as I've been concerned, ever since Denver was eliminated, which I still like can't really believe happened, it's been like,
I
oh, they
know.
should do this because they match up so much better against the two remaining teams. Like a big center is what can really break the Celtics IMO.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. Jokic was definitely, at least for me, the player that I was scared of the most heading into this postseason.
Did Gobert and Towns not scare you?
I have to say, they
You're a
don't
Gobert
exactly.
hater. You're getting redeemed a little bit in this
I'm getting
conference
redeemed a little
finals.
bit for my Gobert hater takes for many years running now. And I think Rudy Gobert had a really good regular season, but this keeps happening with
Yeah.
Rudy, where like as soon as he runs into an elite guard, and admittedly, like Luka and Steph and all of these guys, like they're elite for a reason, but um anytime that those guys get a chance to pull Rudy out in a switch, it's just dead meat immediately. And
Yeah.
it's crazy to watch how consistently it happens. But it does seem to happen basically every year with Rudy in the playoffs at this point.
Yeah. It's a damn shame because you have a lot of up and down where sometimes you'll be like, oh man, that like cat is like unstoppable, or just that combo, those three of Gobert, Cat, and Anthony Edwards, like it feels like unstoppable. But then you see in more recent games where Ant is completely gassed, Gobert looks completely foolish at times, and Cat is getting pulled in favor of Naz Reid consistently. So it's like
Yeah.
That's tough.
it's hard to really have faith in someone who is going to get pulled like that.
And I think the Wolves
It,
will be fine long term.
Yeah, I agree.
Go ahead, Sean.
it just is so weird, and it kind of comes back to what I was saying in terms of matchups specifically. Like the Wolves seem like a team that was engineered to beat the Nuggets specifically, and like they did that, and like when I don't know, I felt like the national media just like gave them the title belt like it was boxing as soon as they beat the
Mhm.
Nuggets. But then here's this totally different team that they clearly haven't matched up at all as well against, and it's just funny to watch that play out, I guess, specifically through the lens of all this East versus West discourse, where like the East is a cakewalk and the Celtics haven't been tested. Well, like I feel like finals winners are usually rested. Like when the Celtics ran the gauntlet in 2022, like it would be tough to be more tested than they were, and they were just gassed at the end of that finals.
And by contrast, Denver steamrolled the league last year, and they went up against, a pretty in round one. They took out a pretty pathetic Suns team. That man, Suns, what is going on? Or I guess they took out the Wolves first, and that was a somewhat challenging series, but ultimately, Jokic overwhelmed them. They crushed a pretty weak Suns team, and then they smacked around a 7-seed Lakers team in the conference finals. And then their reward for that was an 8-seed Miami team that had to just go off of consecutive 6 and 7 game series. Like this is part of why that 1 seed is so valuable. And typically it is true, at least in recent memory, that the teams that end up winning the finals usually do not have the hardest path. In fact, they tend to have almost the opposite.
Yeah, good point. And I'm looking forward to the series. I do feel like you do kind of have the target on your back for sure, but that comes with the territory of having 17 championships already. So that's it's that for a reason. Cool. So yeah, one other kind of moving beyond playoffs a little bit and into the other basketball realm. Do you guys personally play still?
Yep.
Pretty frequently?
Probably not as much as I should have lately, just with how busy things have been. But Sean and I try to play pickup somewhat consistently during the summer. We're both going to be moving towards the Prospect Park area where there's going to be many, many, many courts. So
nice.
Definitely excited to get some run. I'm not sure that I'm the best basketball player in the world, but I sure do enjoy playing it.
Yeah, lately we've been hooping at this court in Bushwick with double rims and no nets. So I'm excited to hopefully, when we move to the park, find a nicer court situation. Yeah, I was a good player. He's good in the post. If he posts you up, he's got some spins.
You got shimmy?
Got some fadeaways.
Yeah, I am definitely an old school post work guy. Do not ask me to dribble the ball. Sean on the other hand is a dead eye. This man is just like Kyle Korver catch and release. Like basically every time he touches the ball, he's either shooting or pump faking into a drive.
Yeah, I'm a 3-and-D guy. I'm from the Boston area. What do you want? This is my birthright.
It's true.
And you guys did the basketball tournament, right?
We actually had
or did you have to miss it?
It got rescheduled. We were supposed to play San Fermin, and when it got rescheduled, we had a show. I think it was in Boston. I think that was the Royale Melt show, maybe. And so we couldn't end up doing it.
Damn.
We would happily do it again this year against San Fermin. Yeah, I mean, obviously, Alan and Ellis have both played basketball at an organized college level, so that's certainly something to take into account. That being said, I think we have some tricks up our sleeves as weekend warriors, pickup guys. We will be able to hold our own. We're going to lean a little bit into Missoula ball, I think, and just get some shots up, play the 3-point variance game. But I think if we play our cards right, we can hang.
And they brought like their friend who was like 6'7", though, who's not in that band. And they either lost in the finals or won. I don't remember. But like,
I mean
credit.
I don't even think Alan played.
Alan didn't play, dude. His ACLs are cooked.
I think he is like too terrified to play competitively in any fashion, just because he's had like 2 ACL knee surgeries and all that. I get it. Not worth like ruining the next like year and a half of your life just for a pickup game.
That being said, definitely ducking the smoke a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I know that tournament I've always wanted to put one on myself. So maybe one of these days we'll get a Divine Sweater team in the bracket.
Let's go.
Oh, hell yeah. Sounds great.
Let's get it done. Put you up against Origami Angel or something.
Sure.
Well, cool. So the last thing I like to do is a little game, and Alex, since when I joined Celtics Lab, we did build a band with Celtics players. Let's do the other game that I usually do, and let's do musician matchups. So in this, we're gonna, for anyone listening who hasn't listened before, the idea is to kind of take some players, this time being Celtics players, and come up with like a musical comp, whether it's a band or songwriter or whatever. And who is that comp, and whether it's based on play style, career arc, random perceptions, how they dress, whatever it is, it's always fun to compare those answers. So let's do some Celtics players of all decades, starting with Jaylen Brown.
So I actually have some thoughts on this based on the prompt that you sent me. Jaylen in particular, there's a comparison that came to mind. When you think of Jaylen Brown, you think of incredible highlights at the absolute peak of his power. Jaylen Brown is, just a majestic watch. Like, you can't take your eyes off of what he's doing. He definitely also has some misses. He definitely has some moments in his game where there's some puzzling decision making. There's some kind of over aggressiveness. He tends to kind of, sometimes alienate people with the way that he plays. Not always. I think more often than not, he's appreciated, but sometimes, there's some decisions that leave you scratching your head. He also has a very unique sense of style off the court, and he cares a great deal about social issues, as evidenced by his contributions, particularly to Black communities in the Boston area, where he's done a really good job, trying to prioritize that. He's a worldly guy. He's an intelligent guy. And he's a little bit idiosyncratic at times. And so for me, the obvious comparison for Jaylen Brown is Peter Gabriel, who has a very unique flair to his style. He also has some absolute bangers. Like, So is a ridiculously good album, just chock full of incredible songs. And with Peter Gabriel, there's always the lingering sense that while he was great in Genesis and added a lot to that band, he might have needed to go solo. And I think that's not something. I believe Jaylen Brown, I really want him to be a Celtic for life. I don't know that he will be a Celtic for life, because I think at some point he might want his team. And I think Peter Gabriel probably felt that about Genesis as well. This, of course, lends itself to the idea that Jason Tatum might be Phil Collins, which we can address at a later date. But to me, Jaylen Brown feels like a Peter Gabriel.
Okay, that's the whole. You got the whole package in there. You got all of the available descriptors in there combining. That's I do love that. All right, interesting pick. What do you got?
One that's sticking out to me is Larry Bird as Bruce Springsteen, because obviously you got the blue collar gym rat vibe, but then the incredible commercial success. Like, you could not make Peyton Pritchard Bruce Springsteen, because Peyton Pritchard, no disrespect, he's great. The Boss was charting like #1 in the 80s for like almost the entire decade. So many hits. I mean, I think the comp is just right there. You match the blue collar aesthetic with out of this world athleticism and talent.
Especially his depiction in I forget the Winning Time.
Yeah.
They really amped up the country working class.
Definitely. He's like doing dip spit at his press conference. I don't know if he was actually doing that, but
Bruce always had a little bit of a chip on his shoulder in his younger days. Larry had the biggest chip on his shoulder of all time. So
I also feel like both of them, as they aged, they kind of had this like status role where, like, they still have the background of the working class, but they polished themselves up a little bit.
Definitely.
Okay, amazing. For my Jaylen Brown pick, I went with Florence Welsh of Florence and the Machine, because I'm gonna go to the stereotype that Jaylen Brown always gets, is that he has no left. Florence Welsh is an incredible vocalist, but she does not play any instruments. Literally does not know how. As far as I believe, I read an article that she just like doesn't do it because she'd rather focus on her vocal performance, which is great because she's an amazing vocalist, and Jaylen Brown is an amazing. He's amazing at what he does, and for what he doesn't, you don't have to worry about that.
Good one.
Like that
cool. So
comp.
that's Jaylen Brown. Moving down the list, what do you guys think of Rajon Rondo?
Sean, you take this one first.
Dude, okay. I mean, like, I need to think about his game though. So he's distributing to others more
Yep,
than
he
he's
he
looking
lifts
for his
everybody
own
else.
shot. So, like, are we looking for someone in a band then?
That feels right.
Like,
It feels like a person in a band who does a good job of like who focuses arguably maybe too much on like
maybe George
trying to get.
Harrison?
Yeah, maybe. So Rondo tries to get everybody else going, arguably at the expense of his own offense.
Mhm.
Like the assist record shit was objectively weird when he was doing that. It felt forced and kind of excessive. Rondo's not for everybody. Like Rondo is, I mean, I loved watching Rondo play, but he was never a good shooter.
Mhm.
He made some head scratching decisions. He was always a little bit of a hothead as well. So I'm
Yeah.
not sure I see the George Harrison thing because George Harrison is like ultra chiller. This needs to be somebody who I
Yeah.
think is like a little neurotic about getting everybody in the band tight and ready to go and perfect. But undeniably has like something going that is pretty impressive to watch.
Well, what you're describing, I feel like naturally Rondo would be a drummer who is like the leader of the band.
It might be
Okay.
Stuart Copeland of the Police.
Of the Police. That's a good one. It's a
My
good
thinking
comp.
there being like Sting is obviously the face of the franchise, right? In the
Paul
way that like
Pierce.
Paul Pierce was the face of the franchise. And I think uh the Police in general, like you don't think of necessarily of Stuart Copeland as the biggest personality in that band, but when you actually look into what's going on with the Police in terms of like the polyrhythms and the syncopation and all of that stuff, Stuart Copeland is just consistently pumping out astonishing stuff. But he's also hyper attentive to detail to the point of like annoying other people in the band. Like if you think about that clip where Stuart Copeland is talking about how like he's like they're like doing a practice and he like does this absurd drum fill that like only 3 or 4 people in the world could ever do, and then he starts cussing out Sting because Sting can't keep the pace with the drum fill. And he's like, this drum fill is going to be talked about in Drummer Magazine monthly every day for the next year. And the bassist can't keep up. And it's just like, it does feel like Sting has that. Like, Stuart Copeland has that thing where like he's trying to get everybody else involved, but he's seeing the game at a very different level than a lot of
Yeah.
his bandmates.
Very interesting.
I like that. You could definitely
Yeah.
go like along that if we're looking at drummers, like Keith Moon with kind of his like self-destructive art. Like that kind of fits into like the way I felt like Rondo's career trajectory has gone. Not to call him self-destructive, but there is
Yeah.
kind of a tightrope to his game. And especially his interpersonal relationships with his teammates on that Celtics team. But yeah, I like the Stuart Copeland. Just that the drummer, that was a good read.
That is, yeah, that's definitely an angle. One angle, the angle I kind of is a completely different angle and an entirely selfish angle because I was never a big Rondo fan. I totally understand the the ability that he had and the talent he had, even when he was in the Bulls. His brief stint with the Bulls, I was never really into him as a player, but I see what people liked in him. And that's why I went with 100 Gex because I don't get the appeal, but I know there is appeal.
100 Gex trying to set the assist record would be very fun.
Yeah, that's hilarious. I love the projection behind that pick too. It's like totally your own taste. I love that.
It's sometimes you got to cater it to your own flavor a little bit.
I love that.
All right, and I love too that of the people I picked for this, of that championship team, I only picked Rondo. I'm leaving Paul Pierce at the door. We already covered he's Sting. It's fine. But let's move into go further back. And I picked more of a, I wouldn't say he's niche, but he does get forgotten sometimes. Antoine Walker.
Okay.
So Twan is interesting because Antoine Walker is pure vibes. Like he's just there to have a good time and get shots up, man.
Yeah.
Dude, Al,
That
I have a
dude.
good one for this.
All right, hit me.
Big Boy from Outcast.
Oh my God, great shout. Yeah, sounds
Like,
good. Antoine, yeah,
you want to
go,
talk about a
go.
guy who's just getting shots up? You know, he might be the lesser known member of like, you know, what should have been one of the greatest, longest lasting partnerships of all time. But they just don't stay together long enough to, I mean, they have massive commercial success, but like the, you know, Antoine, Paul Pierce comp, they don't get over the hump. You know, Outcast doesn't make it out of the 2000s. Like they're gone by, I think, the turn of the decade, if not earlier. It just seems like both for the vibes, like this man is just getting shots out. Big Boy is just making banger after club banger, and you're marveling at his flow. You're marveling at how fast he's rapping. That one just came out immediately.
I
That's
feel like
brilliant.
yeah, that's really good. And I feel like, you know, yeah, you're totally nailed it in that Big Boy is just there to have fun. He'll do a corporate gig, but like he'll have a blast doing it. Like, oh, that's a really good one. Alex, did you have something different?
No, I really like that. I think the key ethos is that like Tuan is very much there to just like get shots up and keep shooting and keep shooting and keep shooting and keep
Yeah.
shooting. And that feels very appropriate for like what Big Boy is all about in like the most fun and respectful way. I really enjoyed watching Antoine Walker, even though
Yeah.
I think we all kind of knew in our hearts that like he wasn't really going to get them over the hump.
Yeah.
His form,
I
dude, the three, like
The Chuck, yeah.
just incredible.
um for Twan, for me, I feel like, you know, I think he does get kind of forgotten for some of those late 90s, early 2000s players. So I went with like a late 90s, early 2000s band that I think gets forgotten. And I had two options for this. One is the band Wheat, which I don't know if you've ever listened to them.
Yep.
They're great. They're like, I think they're one of those people from like that sort of like the threshold of like grunge into indie rock, like that they get forgotten about. And the other being a similar genre, similar name in the genre is Hum. And Hum had that banger Stars, super good. But I feel like, you know, when it comes to they get lost in that changing of the guards of like, you know, we went your Nirvanas and your Pearl Jams, and then we went over into this new kind of like indie rock of the mid 2000s, and that threshold right there gets forgotten a lot of bit, and I feel like that's where Anton Walker was.
Yeah, I like that take. I think the key is like Juan was, you know, at his time, I think everybody knew who that guy was, and he was a
Yeah.
really fun, great watch. People don't think about him as much anymore because, of course, he got dealt, and then the Celtics subsequently won the
Mhm.
title only a few years after that. But he had a moment. Antoine Walker very much had a moment.
He sure did. Honestly, like just as a person too, like I feel like an eventful life. Like, didn't he get mugged twice?
Something like that. Yeah,
Damn,
he
dude, what was
Antoine had
going
a lot of
on?
off the court stuff.
Yeah,
Him and
I
Paul
don't know.
Pierce just,
Paul
Yeah,
Pierce
getting
is a
stabbed.
different story right now. Just doesn't know when to stop.
oh yeah.
um. All right, let's go to our last one, and this is, you know, this is one of the greatest of all time. Uh, one of those winningest of all time, Bill Russell. How do you
Yeah.
put a band? How do you put a musician to that?
So Bill Russell, to me, he's almost as important as a player as he is like a foundational piece of what we know basketball to
Yeah.
be. If you think about like the way defense is played in the modern NBA, none of this is able to happen without the principles that Bill Russell lays out at the very beginning.
I see where
And
you're
if we're
going here,
talking,
buddy.
I think you do. So if we're talking about just like laying the foundation, laying the principles for like what pop rock music ultimately does become, and the lasting impact, the award-winning impact, the legacy that lives on forever and ever and ever, McCartney, to me, is the clear answer for Bill Russell. The inventor of rock bass, at least in the modern sense, the guy who laid the foundation for everything that is to come after him. And if you listen to the Paul McCartney bass lines, you know exactly what I'm talking about because you've heard them 10 million times, aped by everybody, including myself, always. Bill Russell invented the way that defense is played in the modern NBA. His legacy is so large that it's almost impossible to even put into words. And much like there would be no NBA defense and really no NBA as we know it without Bill Russell, there would not be an indie rock scene or even a rock scene in general without Paul McCartney and all of the grooves that he laid down at the foundation.
That's
Yeah, and just kind of to strengthen that point out, that was a great read. I think literally to the year. So the Beatles manager dies, and then Paul McCartney effectively becomes the de facto manager. And like if you watch the Peter Jackson Beatles doc, like he's clearly the one making the shots. And that's like 1966, 67 through the end of the band in 1969. And I believe those are the years Bill Russell was also the player coach of the Celtics. So like the timeline for when Paul McCartney is effectively the player and coach of the Beatles until it ends. Like that's just a great read.
I don't think there's anything more perfect of alignment right there, because I mean even Bill Russell is on the Mount Rushmore of rock music and of the NBA, but Paul McCartney is on Mount Rushmore of rock music. So like it is perfect alignment. And I love the extra layer right there of the player coach. This feels starting to feel a little conspiracy theory.
Wow.
They
Have
have
we
to
ever
know
seen
each
them
other,
in the
right?
same room?
They have to have met each other before.
They must have. Just two
Gotta think.
very important people in the 60s spending time hanging out.
I'm not even going to bother giving my answer because I don't think anything can top that. That's just perfection. Cool. Well, this has been a blast. Love talking Celtics to you guys. I am looking forward to watching the Celtics series and hoping for the best for you guys. Fingers crossed.
Banner
Glad I know how
18,
this.
it's coming.
I'm glad I know how that game works now too. Should have read those instructions before.
That's okay.
And then to Divine Sweater, new music coming. No official dates or anything for that, right?
The record's gonna be out in September. We'll announce it sometime in early July.
Cool. Well, looking forward to that as well. But thanks again for joining, guys.
This was great, Matt. Thank you.